Let's give Harold a chance.
Ian?
Yes, my name's Ian, Doctor Who.
Take a TV series that was a hit with the kids, add a well-known star of horror films, make it in colour, make it bigger, make it wider, make it better. Well, definitely bigger and wider.
They sent me back for the drugs.
The Daleks and Doctor Who make it to the big screen in a film called, funnily enough, Doctor Who and the Daleks.
When shall we explode the bomb? Immediately.
The Daleks, now in colour and in widescreen. Okay, it seems quaint, but in the 1960s, programs like Doctor Who were still being made in black and white and on a BBC shoestring budget, best described as minimum chips. Even the glossy film series made by Jerry and Sylvia Anderson were still seen by most in black and white on the tiny screens in homes at the time. In 1964, thanks to the arrival of the Daleks, the TV series Doctor Who was on fire. Not literally, because that would have involved all that insurance paperwork. In the early 60s, Amicus Films had been making films of various genres, though they'd made a name for themselves releasing horror titles that competed with Hammer Films. The company's principals, Americans Milton Subotsky and Max J. Rosenberg, saw the wave of Dalek mania sweeping Britain, at least among school-aged children, and set about obtaining the rights to Doctor Who feature films. They acquired the rights to make 3 feature films based on Terry Nation's TV scripts.
Let's concentrate on the Daleks.
Milton Subotsky wrote a script that would use as a framework Nation's scripts for the 7-part TV story that had unleashed the Daleks on an unsuspecting world.
So far, so good.
On television, budget realities of the BBC meant there were only 4 Dalek props, which would be supplemented by cardboard cutouts. This was a great way to create scale on the small screen, though your mileage may vary. I once tried this trick at a fan convention I organised, where the guests of honour were all cardboard standees borrowed from a video rental library. It turns out advertising your guest of honour as being Cardboard Dirty Harry or the Terminator doesn't go down too well, especially when the question and answer sessions end up with too many awkward silences.
Hey, could you speak up, Cardboard Dirty Harry?
Doctor Who and the Daleks began filming at Shepperton Studios in early 1965 with an August release date. Things moved fast at this level, with casting finalised a few weeks before the start of filming. Time is money, but when you don't have much of the latter, the former gets royally screwed. As we said, Amicus had a name for horror, and so to avoid any connotation that this was anything other than a movie aimed at kids, the film was released as an Aru production, an entity whose title card would only be seen on the 2 Doctor Who movies made by Subotsky and Rosenberg, along with producer Joe Vigoda and director Gordon Fleming. Doctor Who and the Daleks is a film that's a parallel universe of Doctor Who, with things being familiar yet different. It's a bit like travelling abroad and watching The Saint dubbed into German. Scheisse! Parts of the film keep quite close to the televised script, just condensed to about half the runtime of the televised version. The biggest changes, however, are the ones made to the main characters. Doctor Who is a slightly doddery inventor who lives with his 2 granddaughters, Barbara and Susan. Barbara's boyfriend Ian turns up to collect her for a date when Doctor Who offers to show Ian his thing. It's in the back garden. Thankfully, it's a time machine called TARDIS.
But it's so big in here, and yet it's so small from outside. How come?
It's bigger on the inside, naturally, but this iteration looks like a health and safety nightmare with exposed electrical wiring, tubes of mercury stuck on the wall, and multiple sharp objects that you can snag your cardigan on. Ian accidentally activates the ship without a destination having been set, and the ship transports them to a mysterious planet. They don't know where they are or when they are, and also they don't know how they are or why they are. And this Doctor Who bloke seems more than a little vague. He's totally the opposite of somebody I'd be wanting to design and build a time machine that I was to travel in. They arrive in a spooky forest, a forest where the trees have petrified and the ground has turned to ash by extreme heat.
The heat must have been indescribable.
Look, we've all had summers like that. And then they spy the city, a fabulous alien city, which Doctor Who and Susan are busting to explore, but Ian isn't so sure that they should be hanging about. Additionally, somebody or something has left them a vial of chemicals with pink Smarties outside the TARDIS. There appears to be a fault with TARDIS, which turns out to be a fluid link, which is a tube of mercury that has leaked. Also, they really might want to crank open a window for a bit for some fresh air in the TARDIS. Well, it looks like they might have to explore that city anyway, in the hope that they may have some mercury to spare. The city is pretty alien, yet not so alien that its designers weren't above presenting opportunities for physical comedy. A Geiger counter reveals the extent of their predicament.
The atmosphere is polluted with a very high level of fallout.
They are up shit creek. Barbara has also gotten lost, and now we have these fellas, the Daleks, survivors of a nuclear war who've encased their mutated bodies in these metallic suits. They're powered via a form of static electricity which they collect from the metallic floors of their city. Meanwhile, it looks like the vials left outside the TARDIS were anti-radiation drugs left by the planet's other inhabitants, the Thals.
But they called you monsters.
If they called us monsters, what must they be like?
It's an unusual world to go out at any time. But when I see you out and about, it's such a crime. If you should ever want to be loved by anyone, it's an unusual world. It happens every day, no matter what you say.
Our crew escape their prison cell using ingenuity to defeat a Dalek guard. They work the problem. They reason. They use whatever they have to hand, which in a cell with no toilet facilities does leave them with limited possibilities. Like the TV version, they remove the organic part of the Dalek and recreate the shot of the claw poking out. Though this was edited out of some versions of the film. Ian fulfills every child's dream. He gets to be a Dalek.
Can you get me out of this thing? It's hot in here.
While every person who's ever stared at a Dalek cross-section diagram is trying to work out how he fits it all in there without suffering an embarrassing injury.
For heaven's sake, no, don't touch a thing.
They prevent an ambush of the Thals.
It's a trap! Go back! Run!
And then join together, eventually, to take on the Daleks. This involves a small party led by Ian and Barbara to sneak around the back of the Dalek city, and Doctor Who leading a frontal assault with makeup mirrors. You also will not be surprised that the Thals seem to have an awful lot of makeup mirrors.
Do not move! You are prisoners!
The Daleks have found they have mutated to the point where they now need radiation to survive and want to explode another bomb, but Doctor Who and friends stop it. Can I just say that having to describe the main character as Doctor Who makes me feel like a continuity announcer from the 70s. The film ends with some terribly chosen stock footage indicating that TARDIS has gone wrong.
They must not escape, they must die. I understand.
Doctor Who and the Daleks wanted to look a lot bigger than the television series, which would not be that hard. The film was budgeted at around £180,000, which at the time would have been the equivalent of something like 70 episodes of the TV show. 18 Dalek cases were made for the movie, and while these were the same basic design as on television, they were far more imposing thanks to the extra height and the larger headlamps. On television, the lamps were ping pong balls, and for the movie versions, they were plastic drinking cups. So when the studio gives you lemons, you make lemonade, or you would if you had any plastic drinking cups left in which you could serve said lemonade. Most of the movie Daleks have a claw instead of a sink plunger, and they also have a unique weapon. On television, the Dalek would fire and the screen would turn negative, but they wanted an effect that could be captured in camera. A flamethrower was briefly considered, but in the end they went with a fire extinguisher, which is just as well, as these Daleks seem to catch fire an awful lot. The special effects in this movie are almost all in-camera effects, with some back projection and matte paintings and some miniatures, with post-production effects used very sparingly. Terry Nation's original story skillfully packaged together a number of action-adventure standards: the inventive prison escape, last-minute escape from certain doom, a guy jumping over a puddle for 10 minutes. And in places, it does owe more than a little to H.G. Wells' classic story, The Time Machine. And for the most part, it looks really, really nice. It's far less dated than the television series of the time, which was produced almost as if it was a live show in a multi-camera television studio. The acting in the movie is solid for this type of film, though it is a kids' film, so we don't have too many blood-curdling screams. There's also an incredibly low body count, with somebody falling into a hole, somebody taken by a swamp monster, and all of one person potentially getting frostbite from a Dalek weapon. A lot of old-time fans hate these films for a few reasons that over time seems quite absurd. These days we're all used to having different doctors and also having different versions of various properties. People were used to different actors playing the iconic characters from the worlds of Dracula, Frankenstein, Robin Hood or Sherlock Holmes. And look, since Peter Cushing was in all of those, why shouldn't he also be in Doctor Who?
I have a machine which is capable of crossing the barriers of time and space. I will tell you its secrets if you do not explode the bomb.
However, for younger audiences targeted by this film, having different people playing different versions of their favourite characters from television was difficult to accept. The concept of a cinema version of television material was also fairly new. The BBC's Quatermass serials had been turned into successful features by Hammer, but then the cast turnover of that series was such that it wasn't too much of a stretch. Peter Cushing was a totally different Doctor. He's played as kindly and doddery, with a twinkle in his eye. A twinkle made twinklier due to Cushing's insistence that he wears something blue around his neck to make his eyes stand out more. His costume does look like the inspiration for Matt Smith's Doctor decades later.
I told you to watch the cakes. Now you've burnt them.
Oh, yes, the cakes. The cakes!
At the time, though, the idea of anybody other than William Hartnell playing the Doctor was a really, really big move. And for some, the concept of a different actor playing the Doctor, like a bowling ball coated in Tabasco sauce, was quite hard to swallow. However, in hindsight, with the acceptance of different Doctors and of course multiverses, he's actually a really interesting and unique version of the character, which of course is predicated on you being able to deal with him being called Doctor Who.
I am Doctor Who?
And this is from somebody who absolutely hated whenever the series was written with the abbreviation. Roy Castle plays a bumbling, suspiciously vaguely northern version of Ian Chesterton.
Glad you dropped in.
Okay, so you caught me again.
He's still somewhat heroic by the end, but he does need a nudge or two.
How are we going to do that?
We'll climb.
Climb? I was only thinking about Barbara.
Castle's energy is one of the film's strongest points. Jenny Linden as Barbara does the love interest role well enough. On television, Barbara was originally much older, a history teacher who was unrelated to the Doctor. But here, she does manage to keep her enormous hairdo volumized even during the film's most perilous moments. Susan was still the Doctor's granddaughter, but instead of being an alien playing at being a teenager, she's now a pre-teen genius played by Roberta Tovey.
But I don't understand. They said you were mutations.
There were many mutations after the final war.
The entire casting process was arrived at by producers assessing what the film would need to succeed in the market. Peter Cushing was a marketable name and somewhat known in the US, Jenny Linden provided a little glamour, and Tovey was basically the same age as the target audience. I've also just realised that Doctor Who's granddaughters may potentially be named Barbara Who and Susan Who. They're a who's who of the House of Who. The Thals were now in colour, so now they were quite colourful and confident in themselves. With the story being so condensed, they probably had any depth from the television story flattened into a thin veneer. They're pacifists and they won't fight the Daleks until the Doctor tricks them into helping.
Why did they want to kill us? We came in peace.
Barry Ingham played Thal leader Aladdin. Ingham appeared in dozens of productions over a long career, but it most amuses me to include this appearance in Star Trek The Next Generation.
Oh, that's what I call a wee drop.
Director Gordon Fleming, father of British actor Jason Fleming, does a solid job here with the film's pacing. There is a joy to the Daleks here. They look fantastic most of the time. Apart from the halting way they speak for part of the film, until somebody realised the headlamps were meant to blink in time with the voices. So they fixed that in post.
One of you four must go outside the city.
Much more recently, the BBC's made an alternative version of the original television episodes where they attempted to condense the story as well as colouring the original black and white TV episodes, which now gives the viewer 3 different ways of watching the same story. Or 4 if you watch the version with all the swearing bleeped out.
We will the Thals without leaving the city.
So it is Doctor Who and the Daleks. The characters are there, TARDIS is there, but the TARDIS is very different. It's bigger on the inside, but only just. Rather than a cavernous high-tech interior, we have a rat's nest of wires and cables, which is less high-tech and more the back of my entertainment unit. There's no hint of the series' famous spooky titles or the theme music. The musical score by Malcolm Lockyer is quite decent and suits the film. Barry Gray, usually composing music for Jerry and Sylvia Anderson's Puppet series, provided electronic effects.
Why not exterminate them?
The Dalek voices in the film were provided by the same voice artists as the television series, David Graham and Peter Hawkins. As there were only a few Dalek props made for television, the film crew had to find and train more people who could operate the larger number of working Daleks.
It is obvious that we Daleks cannot use the drug of the Thals.
So we have a film that looks nicer than the TV version, characters who are just different enough, and a condensed version of a serial that on television ran out of steam in later episodes. The film is an adventure film, similar to many movies made in Britain at the time. These days it still feels a little relevant thanks to its Doctor Who branding. It didn't review all that well at the time, and any hopes of the film taking off in the US were quickly dashed, but the film found its intended audience receptive in the UK. The film's relative success meant a sequel was put into production for release the following year, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.
My question is directed to you, cardboard dirty Harry. Can you comment on the rumours of Peter Cushing playing Callahan in a reboot? Dirty Harry! 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 Harry!